So we have a few things that we need to address because Americans now fear a nuclear attack. Now I want to give you the details as to what is going on right now and why this is so devastating. Because here's what we know, and again, I want to give you the full story. So we're going to talk about Russia, we're going to talk about Ukraine, we're going to talk about NATO, and we're going to talk about what the US is fearing right now, which is President Biden and his ability or inability to take action. Here's what I can tell you. So Russia fears that Ukraine will attempt to join NATO. That's the latest fear. As a result, Russia wants to do all it can to prevent Ukraine from joining NATO or from a NATO country bordering Russia. That's the big deal. Now, according to multiple former White House officials, Vladimir Putin is not going to he's not going to be against nuclear weapons or a nuclear attack. And he's going to do whatever he can to further his agenda. Not only that, but Vladimir Putin is too far along at this point to just walk away from any attack at this point, and he's going to continue to fight to make sure that Ukraine does not join NATO. Now, we learned last week that Russia was annexing 4 regions of Ukraine into the Russian Federation. Soon after that, Ukraine was able to take back control over some of these regions, which now they've pretty much taken back all control. And now Russia worries that they're going in the wrong direction. So the reports that we're getting out the past few days are that Russia is likely to go the nuclear route. We've heard reports of their torpedo, which is named Poseidon. This is a torpedo that I believe it's about 150 times stronger than the bomb we dropped on Hiroshima, okay, that killed thousands of people, right? And so obviously the bombs and nuclear weapons that we have available and at our disposal now, whether it's in the US or Russia or wherever, they're much bigger. They have a bigger impact. They can seriously wipe out an entire country or countries. Now, this is why I want to bring this up, because more and more reports out over the past few days are indicating that there's some higher fears of a nuclear attack on Ukraine. And it's not just Ukraine, but a nuclear attack on Ukraine using this Poseidon torpedo would likely be an attack on NATO. And I want to explain why, because NATO, it doesn't include Ukraine. Ukraine is not part of NATO. But we heard from a former CIA director, David Petraeus, and he said a nuclear attack on Ukraine isn't a direct attack on a NATO country. However, the radiation would likely extend to NATO countries, which could be construed as an attack on a NATO member. As a result, the situation can't go unanswered. We would have to respond. And some worry, and Americans really worry, that President Biden isn't that president. He's not President Trump. Okay? He's not George Bush. He's not going to respond with military action. Okay? Former CIA Director David Petraeus even said, and I quote, "You don't want to, again, get into a nuclear escalation here, but you have to show that this cannot be accepted in any way." And he went on and added, "The battlefield reality he faces is, I think, irreversible." Talking about Vladimir Putin. "No amount of shambolic mobilization, which is the only way to describe it, no amount of annexation, no amount of even veiled nuclear threats can actually get him out of this particular situation." Now, here's the fear that many people have. What would happen if Russia decided to use nuclear weapons to attack Ukraine? Would the United States actually decide to step in? And this missile, I think it travels about, or this torpedo, the Poseidon torpedo, it travels, I believe, about 100 miles per hour. This thing can be launched very far away. There's already reports that there is a nuclear submarine near Ukraine, obviously near Russia, but it's the biggest submarine known to man. This one could easily launch these missiles or these torpedoes. Well, would the United States actually step in and do something? That's what many people worry. What is being said is that the U.S. has had many chances to step in different situations over the past. Under the Obama administration, obviously now under the Biden administration, and yet we continue to do nothing. Experts say that this isn't something that we saw under former President Donald Trump and the Trump administration, because countries felt that President Trump would not hesitate for a second to send in our military to bomb a country and to dispose of a threat. But under President Obama, now under President Biden, obviously things are different. So the question is, how far would Vladimir Putin have to go before President Biden decided and said, you know what, that's enough? And so this is a big fear that Americans have, is we wouldn't do anything if Vladimir Putin decided to attack Ukraine with nuclear weapons, and it was attack on, and NATO took it as an attack on NATO because, obviously radiation spewed over into other countries. Some say President Biden would sit back and he'd probably talk to Congress, and Congress would be too slow to do anything, that nothing would get done. And if we don't act against an attack on Ukraine, when President Biden has said an attack on Ukraine, or if any attack on a NATO country is an attack on all NATO countries, what if we don't do anything? This would actually make the United States look weak. And if the United States looks weak against other countries, potentially the United States is weak itself. Again, this is not a ideal situation, because, and I completely understand, we wouldn't want to go and jump into a war between two other countries if it doesn't actually affect our country within our borders. I get that. But at the same time, when Biden is saying, hey, you do this, we're going to take military action, but then he goes and kind of walks that statement back and says, well, I didn't mean military action. We're going to help with military equipment and weapons and funding. That's what we're going to do. So again, it's an interesting situation to be in, but this is why Americans fear a nuclear attack, because it's not just here on U.S. soil, it's on other countries as well. Because President Biden is coming out and saying that, an attack on one NATO country is an attack on all. But is he really willing to do anything? That we don't know, and that's what's scaring many countries that are allies to the United States is, will the United States actually step up? And we don't know. So, as soon as we get more information as to what is going on, I promise I will fill you in on all the latest news and updates. Right now, though, we just sit back and wait. We sit back and wait and see what Vladimir Putin does, see what Russia decides, see if Ukraine takes back more of the regions that were annexed into the Russian Federation. If they do, I would assume Vladimir Putin is going to take that next step. That next step could potentially be nuclear. So we'll see what happens there. Again, as always, as soon as I know more, I promise I'll fill you in on all the latest news and updates. Again, so I want to thank you guys for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys on the next one.